formidable robot.
Retro games were always my favorite. Keyword, were. The way they were rendered and made such an impact on the industry was straight up amazing, and always inspired me to create my own retro-styled games. Granted, it was all the way back when I was 8. I had Scratch to help me learn how to code and create some genuinely functional games. But nowadays I just play on my old NES to speed through games when I had the time. I had quite a fun time back then. One day I wondered if I should get Pac-Man to complete the collection I had, and then sped up to my local Goodwill store across the street and got myself a very suspicious looking cartridge of it, having white Sharpie written hastily on it, saying, Pac-Man. Eventually I went up to the store clerk and asked for how much money it was worth. The clerk's face immediately went pale as snow, as his face immediately turned from nervousness to pure unbridled fear. He collapsed and I immediately tried to resuscitate him. No dice, so I called the ambulance squad and they put him on a stretcher and sped off. I was very much confused on why he had that much of a reaction to a simple rinky-dink cartridge, and went to the other clerk that worked there. She heavily apologized and encouraged me to take it for free. I told her, why would I go off with the cartridge without paying? She later told me this.
Look, I didn't want to say anything, but that co-worker of mine had a really bad experience with that cartridge. It's speaking to him directly or whatever. He'll freeze up whenever he sees it, so I just put it here to make sure that maybe someone can't see what was wrong with it. So please, I beg of it. Just take it away from us, please.
I was kinda surprised when she told me this, and looked at the cartridge. I complied and gave her a few dollars just for when the unlucky one who played this to get back after all of this. I returned home, and later blew into the cartridge and inserted it into the NES. I don't think I'll ever be able to view Pac-Man in the same way ever again, and that's just if I ever see Pac-Man as the same entity as whatever I just dealt with. It started with it being at the glitched stage, me being a little puzzled, but I didn't really mind it. Felt nice having a saved game, you know? I went around, ate the fruit, ate the ghosts, the usual shindig. But suddenly it continued right after I finished the glitched stage. Wasn't it supposed to crash after this? The whole maze looked kinda decrepit, no wonder why kind of is spelled like that in any creepypasta, with the ghosts looking more melancholic than usual as Pac-Man looked more orange in color. I continued playing, thinking that this could be just a ROM hack that could have just been embedded on the cartridge, but then I wondered, how would that even work? I kept playing, and eventually, shit hit the fan quick. The Pac-Man slowly started to peer from the darkness, bit-crushed harps ringing from the empty air. This thing looked deep-fried, with the palette only using yellow, black, red and white. His limbs almost looked humanish, them being somewhat dangly as he approached. Then he finally spoke, facing the screen.
I'm glad you were able to find me again. I was so lonely. Not anymore. Again. Let's play one more time. I love every moment of this. The game overs, the winning moments, the screams, so euphoric is it?
I hesitated but continued forward, letting more of the thing's dingly-dangly dialogue roll out.
He thought he could get rid of me by destroying the last. He thought so wrong, very wrong. But now I have a new boy to play with. A lovely little collector just like he was.
I quickly was disturbed by the fact that ever it was precoded to know what profession I was, or that it actually knew the person who had the game earlier. I eventually went back to playing the weird game, but suddenly, it immediately switched to some sort of platformer-like format similar to Super Mario Bros., with me playing as Inky. Inky looked almost mortified, walking through the seemingly hallway simulator-like hall, also looking exhausted and empty. Eventually he found some sort of corpse. It for being in an NES looked awfully good, and not in a good way. It looked like all fluid was drained from it, it being a dried up carcass. Eventually what appeared to be the thing from the dialogue screen walked up towards Inky, and cut before anything else could be shown. But Inky was heard screaming. His voice sounded dry and crackling, before eventually coming to a screeching halt as the now ash-covered entity walked up to the screen. It held what seemed to be a burnt blue blanket in its hand, holding it up into the air. As it said something that shook me to my very core.
That's all I have for you for now, my dearest, for there will be others. You cannot undo what you have started, and I know it. I always wondered why you ignored my cries. I now know why. I know what you did. You still kept playing that stupid little game while we decayed. While we needed your help the most. You sat there, watching your family get slaughtered and cooked by the flames which you started. I hope you're happy with whatever you're doing now, Nigel.
Then the game crashed, smoke coming up from the cartridge like a building being burnt down to the very ground. Was this game meant for me? Was it meant for literally anybody? I don't fucking know, but I sure as hell ain't gonna find out. I put the game in the kitchen cabinet, aiming to forget about it for a long time. My family was still alive, so what the hell was that thing talking about? But most importantly, how the fuck did it know my name? I've never touched my NES since, as I started streaming some Steam games for years after my experience with that damned cartridge. It hasn't changed since, but I figured that eventually, I'll find out. I was still pretty freaked out, but I mostly laugh at that experience nowadays, because what the hell was it gonna even do? Try to kill me with a hyper-realistic knife? Come on, that shit wasn't gonna harm me. But although it did harm me a bit psychologically. But it's just a little game, what harm could it possibly do?